Welcome to episode 195 of the Sisters in Loss podcast. Have you heard of the term intrauterine growth retardation, or IUGR? IUGR is a term that's used to describe a baby who isn't growing as quickly as they should inside the womb. Officially, it's defined as an estimated weight below the 10th percentile for gestational age, the stage of the pregnancy. And any baby who is smaller than normal can be diagnosed with this condition. Some causes of IUGR may vary to placenta abnormalities, high blood pressure, infections, smoking, or alcohol abuse. And typically ultrasounds during the pregnancy help monitor the baby's weight. Today's guest was diagnosed with endometriosis when she was 19 years old and became pregnant at 23. She dealt with cervical insufficiency and IUGR, and her daughter was born at 34 weeks with stomach ulcers and didn't survive. Keisha Jones was determined to become a mother at 31, and after, with no results, sought the help of a fertility specialist. She did not have insurance at the time and no savings to cover the large expense of IVF. Her state offered a study to cover 90% of the cost of IVF, and she became pregnant after too many rounds. Keisha made it to 23 weeks into that pregnancy before she lost that baby. She found a company that would cover the cost of IVF and tried again at 35 years old. Keisha gave birth to her third daughter at 36 weeks after suffering from severe preeclampsia during that pregnancy. In today's episode, Keisha shares her endometriosis journey and journey through IVF. She shares how to find a study that could cover the cost of IUI or IVF in your state, and how she is supporting parents through infertility in her new support group. This episode is for you to listen to if you have endometriosis, experienced an infant loss, or explored and want to learn more about the cost options for IVF. Here is Keisha Jones. Thank you so much, Keisha, for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, I am a registered nurse. I have been a registered nurse for a little over 12 years. It's my second career. My first career was actually an accountant. And I became a registered nurse because of my trials and tribulations going through infertility, maternal health challenges, being pregnant, and all of that good stuff. So I am a labor and delivery nurse. I have been for about 5 years, and I also am certified as a nurse case manager. So I help women who have come out on the postpartum side as well navigate through the health system and challenges. So it's actually a very, very fulfilling role for myself, and I'm actually feel like I'm able to help women in the community on a very strong basis with the medical knowledge that I do have.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so critical and it's so key. I always tell my doulas, trainees, and mentees that I mentor is that, you have to have that support. Like, we aren't in the same community like we used to be back in the day, where we live close to family and family can come in and be there and love on the mom as well as the baby in the pregnancy and then in the postpartum period. So I love that. It's such a passion for you to do the work. I mean, you literally are in the front lines doing this work. So I would love for you to share a little bit about just how your personal experience in your day job has been throughout this pandemic.
Well, it's difficult because I feel like maternal health is one of the areas that's touched the pandemic very hard, because there are women out here going through these experiences alone. A lot of hospitals and doctors' offices have not allowed partners or family members to come in and support women who are going through different things. And I know personally, and a lot of people out there listening know, when you get news that you never expected to hear and you deal with that with your partner or family member next to you, it's devastating. So imagine doing that by yourself. It's world crushing. And so our role as nurses, as healthcare professionals, has become even more critical at this time because we have to be emotionally there for these people. And I'm a big advocate of doulas, and those people are not even being utilized at this time because they're not allowing people into the delivery room. Seeing on the postpartum side, which I do a little bit more of now, you just see a lot more teaching because the stuff that we were doing with partners beforehand isn't getting done as much. So it really is critical to have these conversations and make sure that people are knowledgeable and have the education to go forward and make decisions for themselves because, you know your body best. I always tell my patients that you know better than I know. I see a snippet. I see you 1 hour for once a week and a couple hours for the rest of your life. You have to tell me what you're feeling and what you're doing. So it's been a big struggle just dealing with the emotional side of maternal health at this point.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm happy that I asked because I think that we have not heard enough from those who are doing the work, especially supporting parents who have had healthy pregnancies. And then, as you said, bringing light to those who get bad news, who may have a loss, who may have a stillbirth, and they have to experience that by themselves because of the pandemic and not having one actually, your support people being allowed in the room. But thank God for nurses like yourself who can hold space for those people and be compassionate and empathetic and really just be there as a listening ear as people guide them through their journeys. But you have a story, and I really want to dive into your journey to motherhood. So take us back on your journey to motherhood. Share with us your loss and infertility journey.
Well, I was married quite young in today's standards, I should say. I was married right after college, so around 22 years old. I knew I had endometriosis at 17 years old, but was never told that it would be difficult for me to conceive and didn't find anything out until I got married. Being young, just out of college, really not having a whole lot of money, but wanting to have a child very badly. For some reason, I saw something in a paper. I actually used to do accounting for a large university here in New York City. And they always used to advertise clinical trials. And you could make nice little piece of change doing clinical trials. And one came up about in vitro fertilization, but they were looking for women who were trying to get pregnant, but may have had some type of issue getting pregnant. So I said, oh, let me try because I know I have this history of endometriosis. And I was accepted into the clinical trial. Didn't really have too much trouble getting pregnant. It wasn't like a very long and drawn out process. And I've been through IVF again. So it was very different being 22 years old, going through IVF. But once I did get pregnant, I started to have a lot of issues. I suffered from preeclampsia at that age. And it was very, very scary going through that so young, because I think a lot of people think, oh, you get pregnant, you have the kid, there should be no issues. And my mom has always been like, oh, having a child is such a wonderful experience. And she's had very easy pregnancies and wonderful births. So I just had this idea of, love and roses all around. And it wasn't that experience for me. I was told around 5 months gestation that my child would have Down syndrome. It was like a 70% chance. So I had to go through a lot of genetic testing and genetic counseling at that time. They were preparing me for dealing with a child with Down syndrome. And then I delivered my oldest daughter at about 32 weeks. She was a NICU baby. Of course, she was born with stomach ulcers. And at that time, I was not a medical professional, but I did my research because I'm a researching type of gal. And there have only been, at that time, you're talking about the year 2000, there were about 142 children ever in the world born with stomach ulcers. So if you can imagine, she was born with a lot of different birth abnormalities. She was poked and prodded and looked at, and it was just a lot of graduating from going home from the hospital. I also had an infection after my C-section. So I was in the hospital for about a week. Don't remember having the baby. Woke up like a day later, like, did I have my kid? Where is she? And I'm in the hospital by myself with no baby. It was extremely depressing. Postpartum depression hit me kind of hard. I went home with no baby. My daughter stayed in NICU for about 4 weeks, about a month. She came home and we were at doctor's appointments at least once a week between her stomach issues. She had an ulcer. She had umbilical hernia. She had issues with her feet. She also had issues. She did have some residual brain issues, but knock on wood today, she is surviving and thriving, a 20-year-old young lady about to be 21, a junior in college, and doing extremely well. Fast forward, life continues on, and her father and I get a divorce. I meet my second husband, and he has no children. So I know from jump, well, most likely I won't be able to get pregnant naturally, and he knows this and he's okay with it. So I decided again to go the route of a clinical trial. And this time, I'll get a little bit more into it. The difference with this clinical trial was they were looking at the difference between traditional IVF and something called mini IVF. Now, those of us who have gone through traditional IVF know that when you take medications to stimulate your eggs, there can be a plethora of shots, pills, and all other manner of medications that you would have to take in a 1 week period. Mini IVF focuses on quality over quantity. So the amount of medications, I basically had no injections because thank the Lord I was chosen for the mini IVF cycle. I only had to take pills. I did not get pregnant on the first cycle. I got pregnant on the second cycle of that IVF. There were 3 rounds you were allowed to have through that clinical trial. And successful pregnancy, got pregnant, no issues. I went to a maternal specialist. I saw my regular OBGYN. And one day I was about 4 months pregnant. I go for the ultrasound to find out the sex of the baby. And I'm told that I don't have a lot of amniotic fluid. And I'm like, okay, well, we're going to deal with this. But the OBGYN and the doctor I had, just in the back of my mind, I knew something wasn't going well, but I would keep on top of them, asking a lot of questions, trying to figure out what was going on. And unfortunately, at about 5 months of pregnancy, my water broke one day when I was home in the bed. And at this point now, I'm a nurse. And like people know, my whole world just crashes down at that point. And my husband drives me to the hospital. And I mean, I couldn't believe this was happening. I was just like, save my baby, just save my baby. That's all I kept saying. Like, that's all I remember. And it was at that point that I knew I wanted to do more. My daughter stayed in NICU for about a week before she passed away. But I remember going to the hospital and just asking nurses, how do you like labor and delivery? How do you deal with this? What do you do special for people who have had infant loss? And the particular hospital that I delivered at, they had such a beautiful bereavement program. I mean, they had social workers call me. They had people come to the house, and there were support groups. But in these support groups, there was no one that looked like me. So while it was very helpful and very supportive, I almost felt like it was expected. That was the tone that I got. And I do live in a suburb of New York City, so it can be, very difficult to navigate sometimes through the suburbs when you are part of the minority in the suburbs and not the majority. So I decided to start my own support group and make it my mission to go and work at that hospital, which is what I did. I got a job there and I became a labor and delivery nurse, and I felt it was my ministry and my calling to specifically care for women who were going through either miscarriage or infant loss while they were in the hospital, because most people don't want to deal with that. I did start a support group called the Black Rainbow, and I found, oh my goodness, look at how many of us are going through this, and we don't talk about it in the Black community. And I'm grateful because today, more of us are speaking up and talking about what experiences we're going through so we don't feel like we're going through this alone. After the infant loss, my husband did not want me to get pregnant again. It was very devastating for him, but I was determined to do it again. So this time I went through traditional IVF, and we paid for it ourselves, and it was successful. Of course, I did have the same pregnancy issues. I had preeclampsia. Now I'm older. I have gestational diabetes. I have to take more medication because I'm over 35, and they're calling you advanced maternal age, and it's playing on my mind. Why are they calling me old? And I look like I belong in high school, but all of these things are going through my mind, and every day felt like a struggle. It was like, what's going to happen today? Am I going to make it through today? Is something going to happen? Am I going to have a problem? And I made sure to put a team of doctors around me that I knew I could trust and I knew would look out for my best interests. And I had the best OB ever. I mean, Dr. Monique Jones, she's one of the best doctors I've ever witnessed in my life. And being that she was a Black woman just made it, all the better, because she just understood a lot of things I was going through, not just as a medical professional, but as a Black woman. I delivered my youngest daughter at 36 weeks. So she's late preterm. I didn't quite make it to full term, but she was healthy, happy, and a bundle of energy, as she still is now. And she's about to be 7 years old in the next 3 weeks. So that's what we're celebrating. And I continue my ministry through the Black Rainbow. So many friends that I've helped through different infertility treatments or just different things that they've been through themselves, whether they've had infertility treatments or not. It's just been a pleasure and a joy just to be able to have that community around me and to be able to call on these people or have them call on me when they need me. So that's my story, and I enjoy what I do. I love my job. I love my career, and I love being able to reach out to people in the community, no matter no matter what walk of life they come from.
I love that. I love what you're doing with the Black Rainbows, and being that you've gone through infertility and understand that process, that even just makes it more sweet for those patients that you come in contact with and that may be going through the same thing. So I love that what you're doing, and definitely keep it up because we need you.
Yes,
We need you. We need your perspective. We need you to continue to do what you're doing. And I know that it's a blessing to the community that you're a part of. So I would love for you to take us through just how really any other resources or tools that you know of now. Obviously, this, having a podcast or social media wasn't available way back when you had your daughter almost 20 years ago. But in the last 7 years, as you went through your traditional IVF journey, who did you lean on? What did you have, a support system, support group, or any tools or resources that you used to help navigate that journey?
Yes, definitely. Through my second two IVF journeys, I leaned heavily on meditation. And one particular program was called Circle and Bloom. And it's specifically, at that time, I know they have a lot of different products now, but at that time it was specifically for women who were going through IVF. People who've never been through IVF may not understand, but those of us who have understand how much anxiety you go through every day. I have to meet this number. I have to meet this goal. I have to do this at 7:02, and I have to make sure I call in at 8:05. I have to make sure that I give this shot. I can only eat certain things. The gamut of stuff that goes through your head. So I needed something to calm down that voice. And that meditation program is self-guided meditation that helps you visualize the positivity and the actual process of being successful in IVF. And I would listen to it at any time. And at that point, I downloaded it to my iPod, and I would take it out during work and make sure that it was about 10 minutes of solace that helped me visualize what I was going through. Because if I had to run from a patient, run in the bathroom and make sure I gave myself an injection and then take 10 minutes to visualize what was happening, I think that was the difference in me being successful and unsuccessful. because I realized the first time I was unsuccessful. I was going through so much. I had my daughter and I'm doing things for the community and I'm working at night and I have a husband. The second time, I just remember, okay, I'm going to do it one day at a time. I'm going to listen to my program and I'm going to relax and rest the day that I have my transfer. The day I had my transfer before I had my second daughter was Halloween. And my oldest daughter wanted to go trick-or-treating. And I laid on the couch. My husband took her trick-or-treating. And I laid on the couch for 24 hours. And I got pregnant. And I remember thinking to myself, that was the key. Just shutting everything out, shutting out all those thoughts and being able just to focus on me and my body. And I realized how much you can heal yourself just by meditating and focusing on the things you want. I mean, it's kind of like the law of attraction. If you focus on that one thing, you will attract it to you. We do vision boards are a big thing now because we want to attract things to us. And it's kind of that same thing. We're creating a vision board in our head. That's the way I looked at this program. So it's really good. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of other products out there besides Circle and Bloom, but meditation was the one thing I felt that helped me aside from having the support. The second time I had a lot more support, a lot more people that I could pull on and say, hey, I'm doing this. Are you doing this too? And I mean, it was so interesting. I even have this one little story. When I was seeing the IVF doctor, when I was paying for it, a lot of the women I worked with were going through IVF at the same time. And the doctor was so strict, he wouldn't want us talking to each other about what each of us was doing, even though we would talk outside of that. But there were so many women going through it at the same time that it was like, wow. I mean, it just made it easier to have that connection and people to say, hey, are you doing this? What about this? Hey, don't forget that. So that's why these things are so important, so we can know how do we move forward? Because sometimes we just don't know. So this helps us to move forward in different ways.
Yeah, it does. And it's so funny that the doctor didn't want y'all talking to each other because y'all needed to share.
Yeah, but not in the office. He was like, no, don't talk.
Y'all need to talk outside the office.
Yeah.
I love that. So as a medical professional, I would love to hear your perspective on just what we can do as a community, as Black women, to really go out and combat this Black maternal mortality crisis that's going on in the state of New York where you live, but then really across America. What can we do individually to help reduce these rates?
I think for us as individuals, I think when I think about my own experience, I trusted my doctors so much that I didn't question. I just would go along with whatever they were saying. I didn't trust the intuition inside of me. It was just like, okay, well, you said that was all right, then I'll do that. And like you said, in the past, we didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all these things at our fingertips to be able to look and say, hey, I saw this. Can you tell me how this affects me? I'm concerned about X, Y, and Z. And I think it begins with us and our own health and being able to question our medical providers and say, hey, is that the best thing? I spoke to so-and-so, or I saw an article, and I'm not saying like, don't look at what the shade room says, but at the same time, if we're looking at specific journals, even if it's something like WebMD that says, hey, this might be prevalent in my community. Is there some way that I can be screened for this? Because sometimes if we don't ask the question, we won't get the answer. And sometimes when we ask the question, we know when we're being put off to the side. And sometimes we have to listen to that and say, hey, I need to go look for somebody else. Sometimes it's not easy. It's not easy depending on where you live. In New York City, we have a lot of choice. But if you live in a place where there's not a whole lot of people to choose from, it can become very, very difficult. So you have to learn how to advocate for yourself. And this is where I love your program about doulas, because doulas come in and they know a lot more than we do. How many times does one person get pregnant in their entire lifetime? Not everybody has 10 or 12 pregnancies. So sometimes you forget certain things and you're in a stressful mode anyway when you are pregnant. So having that person there to be your advocate is important. So now it starts with us, then we're moving to having a doula or having a medical professional that we really trust, somebody who would be able to advocate for us. So advocacy comes in a lot of different forms, not only with ourselves, but it comes in education. And that's why I love these forums, because we can educate a couple of people at a time who will go and tell the next person, hey, I learned about this. And then it becomes us advocating for ourselves, becomes us educating other people, because we're going to talk to our friends and family about the experiences that we have had and share that with each other. And you'll think to yourself, hey, I remember so-and-so told me about their experience. I want to make sure that I keep myself safe as well. And you know what, at the end of the day, there are going to be things that no matter what you do and how much you do it, that things will happen. We know that. We also have to keep that in mind as well. But we don't want to carry a lot of the blame on ourselves, which is what we do tend to do when we experience these losses. What could I have done differently? How could I have acted differently? Maybe I should have done this. And that's all part of normal grieving. But the more we do, the more we can prevent adverse outcomes from actually appearing on our doorstep. And I think it just becomes, a domino effect when we start with ourselves.
Absolutely. I love that answer. Advocating for yourself is so key in the pregnancy and infant loss community, as well as you go through your infertility challenges. Like, you have to advocate for yourself. So I'm happy that you mentioned doulas throughout that process, as everyone needs a doula, especially if you're Black, you need a doula. That's what I always tell people.
Yes.
No matter which part of your journey you
Look, if I wasn't a nurse myself and didn't know everybody where I would deliver, I would have a doula as well. But I have so many people.
Absolutely. So I would love for you to share, where can our listeners connect with you after this episode?
Well, definitely I have my Instagram page where I mainly communicate, which is the Black Rainbow. And I will give you the exact, because it's a pretty common name. So I will give you exact spelling. It's the THE Black _rainbow. So that is my Instagram page, where I just post a lot of education, and I don't post too much about myself individually, but it's really more of a forum where people can offer and receive support while dealing with infertility or issues surrounding infertility. IVF, it's one of the most expensive things that you go through, and everyone doesn't have the means to go through infertility. And that's why I advocate a lot for clinical trials. And I know as a community, we tend to be less accepting, and we don't always believe what the medical community is trying to push on us. And that's from a historical perspective. So it's important to know that there are those of us who have gone through these things, gone through clinical trials, and come out better on the other side, especially if you want to have the opportunity and you may not have the funds. As another resource, you go to clinicaltrials.gov, and you can just type in infertility, you can type in IVF, you can type in maternal health, you can type in any keyword you want, and there will be a plethora of trials, I'm sure, that will come up. And this could be throughout the United States. And some people, if it's free, may be willing to travel. I know when I was going through my clinical trials, there were women coming from as far away as Virginia doing clinical trials in New York City. Or at that time, there was a really big one going on through the government at Walter Reed in Washington, D.C. That was in the year 2000. A lot of women in the military were traveling from all over the country doing that particular clinical trial. So the closer you live to a major city, you probably have a clinical trial somewhere near you that does touch on IVF or infertility. And even if not, you can go to different large institutions that are connected to a medical center and see what type of clinical trials they are doing, which most of them are listed on the clinicaltrials.gov website, but there may be some that they advertise only in their community. So definitely hit that Google search and see what's available, because sometimes you see how much it costs Between private adoption and IVF, I don't know which one is more bank breaking, but at least with my experience with IVF, it is possible to go through it at minimal cost, because I know I couldn't have gone through it as many times as I did without that experience.
Thank you so much, Keisha, for sharing your story and your light. And we're going to keep you lifted as you continue to go out on these front lines and help us, as a lot of us out there birthing babies. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Erica. And I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing with the community. I'm on the Facebook page for Sisters in Loss probably every other day. I'm not a big social media person, but I love connecting with people on there. And I continue to pray for you and everything that you're doing for our community. And I'm so grateful that you've done that, because it allowed me to bring this out to more people. So hopefully more people will be able to take part in clinical trials and be able to experience something they couldn't without that help.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. There are so many ways to connect with the Sisters in Loss community. Join our monthly support group, our Sisters in Loss Healing Collective at sistersinlosshealing.com. Join our free Facebook group at sistersinloss.com/community, or text sisters to 797979 to download your free Journal to Healing ebook. That is sisters to 797979 to download your free Journal to Healing ebook. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sisters in Loss, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Yeah, girl, we on YouTube at Sisters in Loss TV. We love you for listening. Keep the faith. Until next time, this is Erica, and I'll talk to you soon.